Where do you think we are with the Celtics at this stage? They got a lot of credit for regaining their quote-unquote flexibility. Do they really have it, and do you think they're done?
I don't think they're done. I don't think they're done here. I don't think they're done adding to the team, and I also don't think that they're done trimming money at this point. I mean, you look at some of the reporting that is out there. Bobby Manning had the idea that obviously they're going to decline this J.D. Davison option coming up over the weekend, and that gets them really close to the first apron, getting below the first apron. They'd be within about $5 million. I think the plan here, depending on who they can get in terms of players, is to maybe even go all the way down below the actual luxury tax, so that now you have a chance, if you can do that in consecutive years, you can reset all the repeater taxes that start to click in when you're above the luxury tax, and then above the first apron, then above the second apron. And that's sort of what, did them in. Being above the second apron's not great, obviously, but it's like, $6.75 for every dollar you spend. But because they had the repeater tax, it went up to $8.75 for every dollar that they were spending. And that really necessitated some of these moves. So if you're not going to be a championship contender, and I know people look at the East and feel like it is weak and maybe it's there for the taking, I understand that, but I'm sorry. Even if you get out of the East, whoever you're facing in the West, if you don't have Jason Tatum, or you don't have the Jason Tatum we've seen before, you're probably not winning that series. And so the odds of getting there and winning a championship are not great. So if you approach it that way, it does make sense in this year, this sort of gap year for the Celtics, to try and get all the way under the 187.9 of just the regular luxury tax. So that's not second apron, that's not first apron, that's just the luxury tax. To get under that if you can.
Okay, so Chris, getting under that number, again, not the apron, the actual tax number, which means being a non-tax team, would that have been a goal even if Tatum were healthy?
Probably not. That's my guess. I mean, probably not. If Tatum's healthy, with a player like Tatum, you probably feel like every year he's out there, you have a chance to compete for a championship if you put the right pieces on the team, and especially having Tatum and Brown. So I would guess that wouldn't be a goal if Tatum weren't down. But with him down, it sort of makes sense maybe to try and, while you're doing this recalibration, get below that, because then when he comes back, if you want to stretch yourself and you want to do some things to try and go for it again, it puts you in a more flexible position to do that financially, because you're not worried about, the repeater tax. Now, again, you have to do it twice. It's not just this year. That alone wouldn't wipe it out. But if you could do it this year and next year, which you might be able to do, it would make a lot of sense moving forward in terms of chasing more championships with Jason Tatum on the team.
Sorry, so how do you do it?
Yeah, I think what you would have to do is move on from either Anthony Simons or Derek White. And if it were me, I would move on from Derek White. Not because Simons is a better player. I think he's a better scorer, but he's not a better player. I think Derek White has more value. And I think you'd be selling about as high as you possibly can on Derek White. And I know Celtics fans don't want to hear that, but White's value right now is probably as high as it's ever going to be. If they play this year without Jason Tatum and he's asked to be a number two, he'll play well, but I think people will look at it and say, well, he's not really a number two. There might be somebody out there now that can convince themselves that he can be a two. So you're looking at the season he had, averaging 18 points per game. You're looking at his contract. He's making $28.1 million this year. He has 3 years of term on that, plus a player option. He turns 31 in July, so he's a little older than maybe Celtics fans think. And I just feel like with his value this high right now, you could leverage him into something else, where either you're getting a bunch of picks back and you find a way under the luxury tax, or maybe even if you're still over the luxury tax and you're in like the first apron, which they're only like $5 million away from getting into the first apron. Let's say you're still in the first apron, but you've been able to use him and get some different players at different positions and maybe some younger players.
All right, so that's a tough sell for fans. We get that. Obviously, it would be a tough sell for Jason Tatum as well. How do you massage that if they were going to do that and move on from Derek White?
And again, it's a tough sell for Jason Tatum. Why?
Because this is his guy. This is his best friend on the team.
Yeah, it's his best friend on the team. And that would certainly be a tough sell, I think, for Jason Tatum. And it would be sort of incumbent upon Brad and Joe Mazzulla to explain to him why they have to do this. But I think that's the thing. Let's say it's hypothetical, but let's say you're able to get under and it gets really complicated, and I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what I'm talking about in this, but so I'll just say my understanding of it. They would have to get below the first apron to do a sign and trade, but they could probably do that by moving off of just Sam Hauser and get below that first apron because they're close. They're within like $5 million. So at that point, you could do a sign and trade with another team. And so that would maybe be someone like Naz Reid in Minnesota, who's a free agent. He opted out of his contract. So if he does, a sign and trade with Minnesota coming to you and Derek White goes back, then Naz Reid is 25 in a center. So that might be how you sell it to Jason Tatum. Like, hey, we needed bigs. We love Derek, but this guy has a longer runway, and this is a big that's going to help you in your career.
Favorite of Drew Carter as well, Naz Reid.
Yes.
He's a good player, though. I mean, I would take him.
Chris, how do you feel about what they've done so far?
I like what they've done, and I know you guys are kind of like, oh, man, why is Brad getting all this credit? I'll tell you why Brad's getting all this credit, because they got off of these 2 contracts without having to give up any considerable draft capital. Normally in the NBA, to get out from under contracts like this, and Holiday's different because he is valued across the league, but still at his age, with that term remaining, I don't think anybody would have been surprised if they had to attach a pick, a first-round pick, to him. And they didn't have to give up any first-round picks to get out of these 2 deals. And that's why I think people are throwing plaudits at Stevens the way that they are, because he didn't have to give up the draft capital that can help them down the line in order to be able to send out these contracts. And that, more than anything, is what's impressive to me. I mean, getting Simons back is good. We'll see what they do with him. I mean, that's a guy, I said in the show email, either Derek White or Anthony Simons, to me, is not on this team on opening night. I would be surprised if they're both on the roster on opening night. I think that's tough, given what they're trying to accomplish. I think one of those guys has to go for cost-cutting or roster reconfiguration purposes. But the fact that Brad was able to make these, Simons is an asset that you could flip, so that's good. Didn't have to give up a first-round pick to move off a Holiday's contract. Didn't have to give up a first-round pick to get off of Porzingis' contract. That's why Brad is getting the credit that he's getting for these deals.
Okay. That all may be true. He's getting the credit because he's a Celtics GM, and Green Teamers are going to support the team.
I think he's getting the credit across the league, though, Felger.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough.
Look at it and say, oh, this is pretty good maneuvering by Brad to not have to attach a pick to either of these guys and do what they're doing.
Well, I don't think their contracts are all that bad. I mean, Porzingis is a expiring contract, right? It's 1 year left.
No, he's got. No, you're right. You're right.
No,
he's
he
expiring.
is.
Yeah,
he is.
So that's actually like teams treat that as kind of valuable.
Yeah.
Like actually,
yeah,
it can be. I mean, it can be valuable, but it's still clogging up some of your cap space for a guy that might not really take the court that often. You don't know. He's injured all the time. So there was not a lot of cap space across the NBA this offseason. I mean, they got Brooklyn involved in that deal, and that certainly helped at the end of the day. But that's the thing. So, yeah, expiring contract, yes, that does have some value to it. But there's not a ton of cap space across the league. And now you got to carry this guy, at least for a little while. And you don't even know if he's going to be on the court, So you're selling Porzingis really at a low, based on what his injury situation was. So to not have to attach a pick for someone to take him, I think is significant.
Okay, so Gasper says, well, I'll just say we all agree that they haven't really accomplished what Steven spent so much time talking about the other night, which is flexibility. They still don't have it. They've set themselves up to have it, but again, if they sign Horford and Cornette, they're back in the second apron, back in all these taxes, and there goes the flexibility. So it's something still got to give for them truly to have the flexibility they're talking about.
There's another step.
And if he means capital F flexibility, it's not just first apron, it's all the luxury tax stuff. So it's going back below the cap. That's flexibility with a capital F. And if he's serious about it, then something has to give. I say Anthony Simons and Derek White. One of those two is gone. And I've been saying Simons because it's just sort of an easier Band-Aid to pull, I think, for fans and the business and all of that.
Chris, what is it when you say that they could get more for White? That totally makes sense to me. What do you think the likelihood is that what they will do? In other words, are they more likely to move White or move Simons?
That's a good question. My guess would be Simons, just because I think, again, expiring contract, no history with the team, and they're going to want a haul for White. They're going to want real value for White. Whereas Simons, I'm not going to call it a salary dump, but I think that they would be more willing to take back essentially 80 cents on the dollar for him than somebody like White, who is a real asset, a real part of their team. But that's why White should have that. I mean, there's teams across the league. If there are teams that feel like, hey, if you're Minnesota, you feel like you're one player, Golden State, one player away. Some of these other teams, or your team like Sacramento, who wants to be competitive in a really tough Western Conference and probably needs a point guard and has some different player assets there might be somebody after free agency or at the outset of free agency who looks around and says, man, what we need isn't here. Derek White would really tip the balance for us. And somebody gets, I don't want to say they get stupid, but somebody gets desperate and is willing to give them a lot for Derek White.
Okay, we'll take some Celtics calls with Chris. First, real quick, your thought on what Stevens had to say the other night about the Celtics play style and what he saw in that Knicks series. And he sort of circled back to that again and talked about what he saw in the finals. And, I don't know if I tie that into the stuff we're hearing on NBC Sports Boston about the new thing in the NBA is cutting, according to Scal. Do you put all that together and say the Celtics are about to change the way they play?
I don't think they're going to totally change the way they play, but I do think they'll moderate it somewhat and try and get more movement. It's interesting. I mean, we'll see if Amari Williams, he's going to probably be on a two-way if he even makes the team, but he is one of those guys. One of his best skills is passing, and you play him at the high post. Well, if you have a big man who plays at the high post and one of his best skills is passing, it's not standing at the high post and then throwing it backwards 10 feet to the three-point line. It's trying to hit cutters, guys that are running by him on either side behind him. So in order to take advantage of that, you have to cut. And I think Brad probably realizes they need more movement, and they do play a lot of 5-out. But if it's just, 5 guys standing around the arc, one guy with the ball, 4 guys standing around the arc, that gets easier to defend. They do need more movement and motion. I think they'll incorporate that, but I don't all of a sudden expect them to really, really drop down the number of three-pointers they take. I still think that's going to be their bread and butter.